Good to hear. Okay, so shalom again. And the alphabet's coming to the end. We've got to, we're on the letter Tzadik, or Tzadi, and we'll do a quick run through. I think it'll be a little bit shorter than previous times, although it's dangerous saying that because it sets expectations. But and maybe the reason for that is tzaddikim don't have to talk a lot. They can keep things short and to the point. So just catching up on what we've done previously, and we're going to look at the pairs of letters like we've done in the last few weeks, the units and the tens. So we have the 1 and the 10, the Aleph and the Yud. Aleph is Elokim, Yud is Yud Kei Vav Kei Havaya Hashem. Both of them are Hashem, the source of affluence, the source of spirituality, which are the ultimate good, the ultimate energy, the ultimate everything. But paradoxically, in this physical world, it has no effect unless you have some physical vessel, and that is the bet or the kaf. The bet is the bite, the kaf is the kli or the spoon, or the kaf, the hand makes the shape of a kaf, and the dog competing with me here, and this vessel provides a housing, a place in the physical world for the spirituality to be, but more important, a means for the spirituality to express itself. Every time I try to give a slightly different example of how this works, the example I'm going to take today is a person, right? A person is made of a neshama and a body. But if you separate the body on its own is a cadaver, is nothing. It has no existence. And if you have just the neshama on its own, it has no place in this world. It's got to go to the other world. But when you put them together, then you got the person, then you got the being. But everything you see the person reacting, like you listening to me, you're watching my mouth move, you're listening to the voice coming out of me. Also, you see me talking with my hands because I'm Jewish. So the way that the neshama expresses itself is through the bet, through the kaf, the body. And then we have the gimel, which is these two coming together. And once you have the two coming together, you can gomel, then you can start doing good. Or if you're doing it in the tens, which is in the tziburi, in the cloud zone, right? Lost my English. Then it becomes more spiritual, and the gemilah, the giving, is giving of learning. That is the limud, that is the lamed, that's the melamed. Then we come to the next pair, the dalet and the mem. We see the dalet is the dal, the four corner. He closes off the four corners, the letter dalet, as does the mem, closes off the other two. But by being dal, by having nothing of their own, they're the ultimate receivers, and then they make the perfect pair for the gimel. You have the giver and the receiver, and then you have a complete system. And when we spoke about the mem, we said the mem is a process, right? Because once you have the two together, you have the mem. The hay is the combination of the two, because the hay's got a dalet and a yud inside it. And the nun is, this is like the fish, eternity, connecting worlds. Also the eternity, the completion. I call it completion and perfection in unity. When we spoke about the units, we said the Vav was the 6 corner directions of the world, of the 6 days of the physical world, and the Samach is exactly like that. The Samach is a circle which goes in all directions, just like the 6 directions, and that's God's influence or God's smicha. Samach is somech, which supports us from all different directions. If you're talking about an individual, or if you're talking about the klal, if you're talking about people as a whole, then the samach takes into account all the different people and all the different situations, Hashem creating this amazing situation where each happening that happens in the world takes care of everybody at the same time in their different ways. And that is the samach, the round samach. That's somech. Vav Zayin, is the Vav, the 6 directions with the Yud on top, with the Shabbat, in other words, spirituality inside this world. And we said that is already the Ayin. The Ayin, we said, is the eye. The eye looks, we see things, we experience things. The eye is the interface to our neshama, the inside of us, and the external world. On the simple level, it takes in. On the slightly deeper level, the eye actually broadcasts as well. We look in my eyes, and you'll see what I'm feeling. You'll see that I'm being honest, and that is because the ayin, like the zayin, is a combination of the spiritual world and the physical world working together. But when we got to chet, which is 8 was above nature. The bris, the Brit Milah, we do on the 8th day. We celebrate Simchat Torah. Torah is above nature. On the 8th day of Sukkot, we celebrate the receiving of the Torah, Shavuot, on the 8th week after Shavuot. When we come to the the mouth, then we're talking about attaining the metaphysical. When we talk, when we express our thoughts, that is already more metaphysical, which is on a deeper level than the eye. Okay, we spoke a lot last week about the comparison between speech and hearing, sight and sound. And we said dibur, sight, speech is a lot deeper. You can only hear one thing, but you hear it in depth. Whereas sight, you can look at many things, but on a superficial level. So after zooming through, I guess 16 letters, we come to the next pair, which is the tet and the tzadik. And the tet, we said, were separate individuals. Each one has to be an individual to recognize his own rights. Before you make a team of players, each one has to have the value. It's recognize its value. Before you have a team of soccer players, this is for your boys, Suki, each player has to know how to play, how to develop himself, what his specific role is, whether he's the goalie or the forward or the wing. Each one has a different expertise, and he has to develop that. Only afterwards, when we get to the yud, do you bring them together. That was the tet. And what is the equivalent when you come to the klal? That is the tzadik or the tzadi. So this letter is quite a fascinating letter, and it's the one letter. There's another one that isn't normally called by its proper name, right? The proper name is tzadi, without a k at the end, right? And everybody calls it a tzadik. It could be just that it sounds so much like a tzadik. I saw in Rav Kook's book, he actually says, because the letter after the tzadik that we're going to relearn Bezrat Hashem next week is the kuf. So you have the tzadi and the kuf together, you get the tzadik. But we'll keep that for next week, maybe. But what we know is that one of the meanings of that, the meaning of the word tzadi, is actually tzadik. And we have to understand what is a tzadik. And we know that there are other words that related to tzadik. Ted and I discussed briefly on the phone earlier that there's the word tzedakah and there's the word tzedek. And these seem to be different things, right? Tzedek is justice. Justice is, if you're right, you'll get what you deserve. And if you're wrong, you'll also get what you deserve. But tzedakah is like rachamim. You'll get, even if you deserve it or not, you'll give the person tzedakah. So how do we relate to this word tzedek, tzadik? What does it mean? Another explanation of the word tzadi without the kuf at the end, the real word is from the word tzad or tzayid, right? If you move the yud in the middle, latzud is to hunt animals. So the books explain that what is the connection between the hunter. I mean, a hunter seems somebody very, very different to a person who's a tzadik. Okay, Esav, the two twin brothers, Yaakov and Esav, were the epitome of the two opposites. One was a hunter, Esav was the hunter, and Yaakov was the tzaddik. So how can we have the same letter describing both of them? So the one explanation that I saw in a few different books, that it depends how you use your hunting skills. Some people use their hunting skills to hunt animals, which, by the way, to just go hunting as a sport is asur according to Judaism, because it's tzar balei chayim. You're not allowed to stomach hurt animals. You're allowed to shecht animals in order to eat them because there's a benefit, but just for a sport to go hunting is not permitted. But and some people have more of a subtle hunting, right? They hunt people. Sometimes it's physically, and sometimes, we know in this generation, sometimes it's intellectual or emotional hunting, shaming, and especially today with all the social means that are available to us, we know that sometimes what they call as emotional violence is as bad, maybe even worse than physical violence. But some people can actually use that hunting technique, take that ability. What do you do? You hunt. You take your strength and you say, I'm stronger than the other person or the other animal, and I overcome him. And we use this to overcome our yetzer hara, our negative inclination. And that's also considered hunting. So that is the simple explanation of how the Tzayid relates to the Tzadik. Now, I couldn't help writing this, even though I never saw it in any book, but the same word Tzad also means the side, right? You have the one side and the good side. Like when we say in English, on the one hand and on the other hand, in Hebrew you say mitzad echad kacha, mitzad echad kacha. So I think this reminds us a lot of the two twins that we just spoke about, right? That they're both tzadim, they're both tzads, but they're both different sides of a coin, but very, very different sides. Okay, sometimes the same coin, but the two sides will be exactly the opposite. So maybe that's what the tzad is. It's also interesting that in the Kabbalistic books, the epitome of the evil forces in the world, however we understand it, okay, I'm not going to attempt to now in this show to try explain what those evil forces mean, but assuming that there's evil forces in the world, they're called the Sitra Achra. Sitra in Aramaic means tzad, means side. Achara means the other. In other words, you have the world, which is the positive world, and then you have the other side, right? Not the other side of midnight, but the other side of the goodness. So that's possibly what tzad is. And with that, we've covered the first property of the letter Tzadik, with the three different explanations of what the word means. The numerical value is 90. Now, the reason I wrote 900 in brackets, and I did the same when we did last week, we did the 80, is because when we spoke about in the very, very first shiur, that the otiyot sofiyot, the end letters, some people add them to the end of the alphabet. And then the gematria is in the hundreds. And I think this is, because it's a little bit difficult to understand, I'm going to actually jump quickly to that first slide and show it to you. Not the first slide, but one of the first slides. I'm going to try to find it quickly. Oops, I've went in the wrong direction. Okay, here we've got a list of the AlephBet. Okay, the letters from Aleph to Taf, carry on from Yud to Tzadik, and from Kuf to Tzadik Sofit. So the Aleph goes from 1 to 9, and then we've explained before, as we know well now with these letters, after it gets to 10, it goes up in the tens. And today we're doing the last of the tens, the Tzadik. And next week we're going to start the hundreds, and then the Kuf, Resh, Shin, Taf, the last four letters, go up in hundreds to 400. So a lot of people take the 5 letters that have got otiyot sofiyot, that have got different shaped letters when they appear at the end of the word. That is the kaf, the mem, the nun, tzadik, and pei and tzadik. Normally we call them mansepach. We normally pronounce them in a different order. But you write them in the order that they appear in the alphabet. And then the kaf sofit is 500. The mem sofit is 600. The nun sofit is 700. Pei sofit is 800. And tzadik sofit is 900. Now what I was emphasizing by the parentheses over there is if you look at the kaf over here, it's 500, but the regular kaf is 20. There's no real connection between them. The final mem, the mem sofit is 600, but the regular mem is 40. The nun sofit is 700, the regular nun is 70. But now with the last two, the pei is 80 and 800, and the tzadik is 90 and 900. So that's all I was hinting at, that there's a stronger connection between the pei, Tzadik, and their final letters, which when we get to the final letters, maybe we'll understand that a bit better. But anyway, the numerical value of Tzadik is 90. And here we have a combination of, I called it a paradoxical combination. What they're calling the Gemara Tarta de Satri, two things that contradict each other, paradox. On the one hand, when I spoke about the tet a few minutes ago, we said the tet, the 9, is everybody's in their own direction. They're not a group, right? We're not together. On the other hand, when we talk about all these numbers in the tens, that the Yud, Kaf, etc., all the numbers in the tens, they're all groups, they're all in the tens. So now you've got something that's individual and it's a group. So the way I think we explain that we should explain that is here we have individual groups, okay, like in the Knesset, right? Or you have a whole lot of parties. And if each party on the one hand is not just an opinion, not just one opinion, but it's a group of people, and therefore it's got a greater value, because the more you have, the more klali you are, the more general you are, the greater value you have. But nevertheless, it's not all inclusive. It's a subset, okay? It's not the total. It's not just a small set. It's not a complete set. It's a subset. And that's what I think the number 90 describes, okay? That you have a group that has a common agenda, but not just a personal selfish agenda of mine, but taking into account of a few people together. Another thing it's we often quote the well-known Mishnah in Pekei Avot, the ethics of the fathers, that talks about the significance of different ages in our lives. When we're 5, we should start learning Torah. When we're 10, we should start learning Mishnah, etc., etc. And when we're 18, we should get married. And when we're 20, Dov, I think. And anyway, when it comes to 90, where are we when we're 90? So the word is ben tishim lasuach. So here again, we have two different explanations. The simple explanation is from the word, the same root as lehishtachavot. In other words, generally when people are old, they start being bent over. And by the time you're 90, you're not as upstanding physically as you used to do. And maybe even socially, right? Maybe you're more quiet spoken, etc. Thank God in our generation, where the life expectancy is increasing all the time, we see a lot of exceptions to this. But there's another explanation to lasuach, which is which comes from the word siach. Siach, sicha, is a conversation. Okay, and this relates to the pair we discussed last week. In other words, it's not coincidental that the Tzadik comes straight after the pair, after the mouth. But when you get to the maturity of 90, you realize that not everything is your strength of your body. You've got the roga, you've got the shalva, the serenity to be able to sit with people and have a sicha, and to be able to talk. And maybe this comes together, even though lasuach, to be bent over, seems something negative, but to talk is something positive. Sometimes they come together. And I'll say a general sentence that I say often to people. You know, in the general way of thinking, we view old age as something negative and very scary. Okay, because when I'm at my peak, when I'm 20 or 30, I've got all my physical strength. And, you know, when we're born, we're still very weak and slow. We build up 2, 3, 4, get to bar mitzvah, then we get to 20, 30, we're all powerful. And then as we start getting past 40, suddenly we're not as tall as we used to be, we're not as strong as we used to be, we're not as fit as we used to be. And we sort of get the feeling that life is deteriorating. I've got a little bit less life in me all the time. But what I say is, there's a different way of looking at it. What inside of each of us, as we said before, is the neshama and the body. These two parts that come together and work together. And even though they complete each other and complement each other and work as a pair, The question is where the focus is. And when we're 20 and 30, the focus is on the body. Yes, we've got the neshama, and some people are more and some people less, but the focus is on your physical strength. And as we get weaker, and especially if you develop your spiritual side, the focus, not that the whole gets smaller, 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 it's that the relationship changes. The physical gets smaller and the spiritual gets bigger. Until when a person gets to 120, we're a complete neshama, right? And it's something that's actually very, very positive. And I think it puts a beautiful perspective on aging. Okay, so if it's a little bit harder to go walking, a little bit harder to get up in the morning, and we kvetchen a little bit more, it's an opportunity to al cheshbon hasuach lekabel yoter siach. Okay, at the expense of being bent over, to be able to talk more. So that's the Mishnah in Pekei Avot. That's the second aspect of siach. The shape is a very interesting shape. Okay, it's probably one of the most complex letters in the AlephBet. I mean, you just look at it and it looks like I don't know, a kid's drawing with the lines all over the show. But actually, what they explain is that this left part is actually a nun that got slightly crooked, and what made it crooked is the yud on the right-hand side that pushed it down. Now, the nun, as we said a little bit earlier, and we learned about 2 weeks ago, the nun is the so it's like the fish, the eternity, the capability of taking multiple forces and generating eternity. So the fish, for example, links between different worlds, between different beings, etc. The fish in Hebrew is a nun. So here we have the strength of the nun, but what is leading it, it's not just the fish on its own, but it's the yud. Okay, the yud, which Hashem is working together with this koach, with the strength of maturity that has come through the nun. So that is the combination of the two. And finally, the first letter, and you'll see, that appears, the first word that appears in Torah that begins with the letter Tzadik. And I've actually got 2 verses here, and I'll explain why. But the first one that I found was Vaychulu Hashemayim Haaretz V'chol Tzva'am. Okay, the word Tzva'am. Now it's interesting. It says here it's in chapter 2, verse 1, but it should have been chapter 1. Okay, this is again a comment in parentheses. The division of the Torah in according to words and psukim and verses is from Hashem. The division in the chapters that we have today is of Christian origin from the King James Bible, and it's so common today that we all use it. But you got to be a little bit careful, because very often when they did this, they did it with intentional mind of pushing forward certain Christian beliefs. And this is an example. In Judaism, we believe, as I think it's come over so often in these shurim that we've had on the letters, that the whole aim of the world is to blend together the spirituality and the physicality. And Christianity separates them. If you want to be an ideal Christian, what you have to do is you have to, especially a Catholic, right? You mustn't get married, go to a monastery, cut yourself off from the physical world, and then just live a spiritual life. If you do that as a Jew, you're missing a lot of mitzvahs. You're probably missing the biggest, most important mitzvah of getting married and having children. If you want to be a good Jew, you have to live in this world. You have to connect the body and the neshama, like we said so many times, and we've said it a few times today. And that, by the way, we're talking here from Bethel, the famous ladder in Yaakov's dream, Mutzav Arza, it's physically stuck on the earth, it's stable on the earth, but its head, Magia Shamayim. That's who we got to be. We got to be somebody whose head is floating in the sky, but our bodies, our legs, are firm in the physical world. I'll tell you something humorous just to break it a bit with the that I once heard on the radio many years ago, where somebody was talking about a conversation, a religious guy, I don't know if he was a rabbi or not, he had a conversation with a priest. And the priest said to him, you know, you are racist. You think you're the chosen people. And he answered the priest, he said, you know, first of all, it's true. I mean, just look how many percentage of Jews there are and what the percentage of the Nobel Prizes there are, and you see who the chosen people. It says, but it's not necessarily godly. It probably is godly, but it could also have a logical explanation. If you today, in this modern world, everybody learns and everybody knows how to read and almost everybody goes to university these days, right? Everybody's educated. But if you go back to 150 years and more, very, very few people were educated. Maybe the doctors and the religious leaders, the rabbis and lahavdil, the priests. So when you had the best minds in the world, they went to either the seminary or to the yeshiva. Now, if you take all the Jews and you take the best people with the best IQ, you put them in the yeshiva, and you take all the Christians with the best IQ, you put them in the monastery. What happens in the monastery? They don't get married, they don't have children, and slowly you dwindle out the genes of the high IQ. But the Jew marries as the daughter of the Rosh Yeshiva, he has 10 children, and that's why we became the chosen people. So I'm not really sure if that's the reason, but I thought it was quite amusing that this rabbi said on the radio many years ago. But nevertheless, I just brought this because this is Bereshit Bet, but it's actually talking about the creation of Shabbat. Shabbat is the end of the creation of the 6 days. It's the 7th day. And we Jews believe that Shabbat is an integral part of the 6 days, right? It's like the Zayin comes together as one. So when we read the Torah on Simchat Torah, when we read Bereshit, we read the whole thing from Bereshit to the end, Asher bara Elohim lasot. The Christians, the way they divided the Bible, they'll read the first 6 days, and then it's the end of the chapter. And then the new chapter, then we'll talk about Shabbat. In other words, you want to get to Shabbat, you want to get to the holy day, leave the 6 days, and join the 7th day. So again, that was in parentheses, but I think it's a very important understanding. And I think maybe even more than the belief in Jesus, at least I saw this in a book many years ago in the 7 questions people ask about Judaism. This is probably a more basic difference between Judaism and Christianity, even in the belief in Christ. The fact that we believe in combining these two worlds together for perfection. But the first word that appears, that begins with the Tzadik, is the word Tzva'am. And we know the word Tzava is an army, right? And literally what it says, Vayechulu, we all know the verse, but let's make sure we understand it. Vayechulu, from the word to be complete, from the word kol, hachala, Vayechulu hashamayim ha'aretz, the heavens and the earth were complete. By the way, the fact that were heavens and earth, the two opposites, are now complete and they come together. Again, the physical and the spiritual coming together. V'chol tzva'am, that's the word of the tzva'am. What is the tzva'am? Tzva'am is the armies. Now, this reminds a lot of what we said about the paradox of the number 90, the individual groups. In other words, we've got forces, we've got little armies that aren't the complete cloud, not everything together, but big groups, and that is what the first Tzadik in the beginning of a word appears in the Torah. Now, I wrote also here, it appears earlier in the Torah in the word Betzalmo. This is in this book of Rav Zamir HaKohen. And the difference between what I did and what he did is he said, because Betzalmo, the bet is not really the part of the word, bet is in, and the actual word is tzelem. So he says the first word is tzelem. Nevertheless, I wrote both of these down because I think that is exactly the Tzadik. Tzelem is the image of Hashem. God created us in his image. What is the image? That's exactly the Tzadik. So I want to now bring these all together in 1 or 2 sentences. What is a Tzadik? What is a Tzadi? A Tzadik is not somebody who's born perfect. It's not somebody who's cut off from life. A Tzadik is somebody who realizes that there's two tzadim, that there's two sides to life. There's a physical and there's the spiritual. And he's a complete person. And the Tzadik will take this complete picture, right, which is the nun. Okay, that's the nun that we have over there. And remember, we said the nun is like the hey, it includes both the dalet and the yud. It's the 5, it includes both the giver and the receiver. And he will take this nun and make sure that in this nun, in this world, the yud is the controlling force of the world. And therefore the tzaddik is the combination of the two. And therefore the tzaddik, on the one hand, will give tzedakah. If somebody needs tzedakah, and the best way to help a person, without asking questions, he'll give him tzedakah. On the other hand, the same tzaddik, he will realize that if you have just tzedakah, and you don't have tzedek, if you don't have justice, if people aren't accountable, the world will be destroyed, because people's inclination will just overtake the world. So that same tzaddik will, when needed, he'll be very forceful, and he'll hunt down the evil people, and the Sanhedrin will kill people and whip people if need be. That is the balance of the tzedek, of the tzaddik. It's called, it's interesting, the word for a scale, old-fashioned scale, where you weigh up the good deeds and the bad deeds, is called ma'agalei tzedek, right? So that's explains the word tzaddik, right? That what he does, he takes the yud and he sees the good and the bad. He hunts the bad if needed. Okay, he hunts the bad, he doesn't hunt the good. And if not needed, he'll give tzedakah. He'll always be giving tzedakah. And that puts him in the group, that puts him in the, makes little groups that aren't perfect. Tzadik doesn't have to be perfect, but he'll make groups of people that are as good as they can be. Okay, they're not the ideal, but they're, there's remember at school I learned there's a difference between two English words, optimum and optimal. Okay, optimum with an M at the end is something that's optimum, absolutely perfect. It's the best solution. Optimal with an L at the end is something that's the optimum in this particular situation that we're in. It's the more subjective optimum. Okay, in a non-perfect world, this is the best that we can achieve. Like you'd say in Hebrew, hara b'mi'uto, okay? And that's what the 90 is. On the one hand, it's not the whole world, it's not the complete klal, it's still individuals, it's this paradox, but we have the groups. And that's the tzvaim, the little armies that we spoke about, that are in between the heavens and the earth. It's not quite Vayichud Hashemayim ba'aretz, it's not quite the whole thing together. It's still tzvaim, but they're already starting to get together. Okay? And that is the Tzelem Elokim. I don't have a lot of extra points. This next slide is very short. Just actually one more point, and that is the point from the quote from my favorite Gemara on the subject about the youngsters who gave the perushim of the letters, and when they got to Tzadik, they said Tzadik kfufa, Tzadik pshuta. Okay, I didn't actually explain it, that there's an open tzaddik, the end tzaddik, and the closed tzaddik, the one that's bent over. And that is two kinds of tzaddikim that you have in the world. You have a tzaddik kafuf, this is like normally the image that you have of a tzaddik, right, bent over and modest. But there's another kind of tzaddik. There's a tzaddik pashut. So normally people explain, this is the difference in this world, where to be a tzaddik, you have to be bent over. And in the world to come, you can stand up and be a tzaddik. But I think in our generation, with the new Jew, the new Israeli, since we've got the state of Israel, we can see that you can have a tzaddik that stands straight, and if you're standing up for Am Yisrael, for Medinat Yisrael, that's a tzaddik pashut. Okay? As somebody once said on Yeshua, as in years ago, that it was a miracle that in 100 years ago, right, in the 1950s, you look at all the pictures of the Jews in newspapers. They're all bent over. They all got these long noses. And okay, a lot of them it was just anti-Semitic, but that's what Jews look like. And all of a sudden, comes 1948, a few years later, and the Jewish image changed. All of a sudden, we got blonde Jews, and we got short noses, and so suddenly the physical shape of the Jews changed. And that is because the world has become a better place since since we have the state of Israel. It's not perfect, we're still getting there. But what it means is that, why is a tzaddik traditionally bent over? It's exactly what we said about lasuach. That when you get old and you've got all these physical forces, in order for your spirituality to come out, you subdue your physical forces. But in an improved world, the physical forces are enhancing the spiritual forces. And then you can be a tzaddik pashut. So when these traditional explanations say tzaddik kafuf is in this world, a tzaddik pashut that can stand up straight is in the world to come, one of the explanations is the world to come doesn't have to be in heaven. It can actually be as the world progresses slowly towards the Mashiach, and the physical world becomes improved all the time. We still have a way to go, but it's definitely relates to that. And it's interesting that it related to the Ne'eman Kafuf, Ne'eman Pashut, the children related to somebody who's trustworthy, who's reliable. That's the Tzadik, has to be a trustworthy person. Hosif lecha katuv kfifa al kfifato mikan shenitna Torah be'manud rosh. Okay? It says that here, if you really want to learn Torah, just like the Tzadik is bent over, only a person who's capable of being modest is capable of learning, of learning Torah, and that's very important. In order for the tzaddik to stand proud when he's coming from the Torah, when he's receiving the Torah from Hashem, from the rabbis before us. The last few weeks, somebody's made contact with me that I used to work with, and he told me he wanted to learn Torah. And when I started communicating with him and discussing some topics, and I realized that all he wants to do is to show how clever he is and how that he's even cleverer than Rashi and the Amoraim and etc. etc. The discussion got a little bit more tense. I was very strong. So that's not Torah. You may learn the words of the Bible. That's not Torah. So in order to become, again, this is paradoxical. In order to become the tzaddik that can stand straight, when you're faced with the source of spirituality, and whether it's Hashem himself or whether it's the rabbis or our fathers, we need this modesty. So I think that's the tzaddik. The tzaddik, I'll end up with one verse that I may have mentioned before. Sheva yipol tzaddik v'kam. A tzaddik will fall 7 times and get up. A tzaddik is not somebody who's never fallen. To be a real tzaddik, you have to fall. And why do you have to fall? That you'll have this modesty, and then you'll be able to realize how you fell and be able to grow again. Okay, I think we spoke about it when we spoke about the nun, which is nefilah, and the samach that lifts it up. So in one sentence, we'll sum up that the real tzadi, the tzaddik, he sees the complete picture, the good and the bad, and manages to bring them together to create the perfect combination. Ad kan. Any questions?